Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it, but it really is. I mean, if you're dedicating your time to it, right? I think it's like the thing there's like that Greek, I don't know how to pronounce Greek words, but it's like arete or arete, where it's like ARETE, right?
Yeah.
And it's like specifically it's like the pursuit of improvement, the pursuit of greatness, right? And
Yep.
it's like it's not so much the greatness, it's the pursuit part that is actually valuable in it, right?
100%.
And I really think it's like, yeah, it's like, cool, man, like sell a PDF and like go surf. It's actually a lot easier to do that than people think it is. You don't need that much money to go do it. But it's like, but you're still surfing and like trying to get better at surfing. And I'm like, cool. You know what I mean? Everyone's got a thing they're trying to self-actualize. Yeah, it's really fascinating that it's interesting to me because I came up in the online marketing subculture, right? It's like online marketing now is mainstream. At the time that I was learning it, it was like pretty shady. It was like
Me too.
bank. Yeah, it's like, yeah.
I was in some gray hat. I was in like some gray hat backdoor SEO rooms where people were talking about all kinds of crazy. Like this is like 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
When it was like the wild. You could do. I mean, I had spinning software. I was in big. Like these are not even gray hat, black hat link sharing groups.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Like I was in the whole thing too. I was just fascinated by the whole thing, but you're right. But not to cut you off to finish your point.
No.
But yeah, it used to be way different than it is now, you know?
Yeah. And that culture is where the whole idea of like sort of early retirement, like that was, and because that was what got sold. That was the vision that got sold, right? Yeah. It's like, I'm sipping Mai Tais and I'm selling stuff online. Because like selling stuff online is this totally radical idea where it's like completely leverages your time in a very different way. And it completely decouples like the amount of time you put in versus what you got to spend. And there's no marginal utility cost. And like, it's wild, right? It's a wild universe. So it was like, anything's possible. And it's like, it was like, what is the fastest, easiest way to do that? I'm going to sell diet pills to teenagers, right? It's like, whatever it is, it's like, you know, and it's interesting to me when that seeps into my mindset, because it's still a part of that program. It's sort of kind of the way I learned about marketing, right? And I'm lately really trying to break the connection in my head between marketing and how much money I make, right? By which is weird because I'm a marketer, obviously, right? But I'm like, no, I was like, here's the thing, man. It's like you can make a really good income by marketing yourself really well, right? But the people who are really, really successful, like next level successful, whether you decide to define that in terms of revenue, whether you decide to define that in terms of impact, whatever you want to do, they are just really, really good. And it's like good at a level that like embarrasses everyone else, right? I was thinking about this with like podcasting. We're on a podcast, right? I have a podcast. I love podcasts. Podcasts are awesome. It's like, have you listened to This American Life as a podcast? They just won a Pulitzer Prize for audio reporting. It's a thing that didn't even exist. They basically made it exist to give This American Life a Pulitzer. And it's like, you listen to This American Life and you're like, oh, I'm not doing what they're doing. They are doing something that is like 10 times their closest competitor, right? It's gross. It's literally disgusting.
Yep. And
it's like you get incidences like that where it's like, okay, I'm like, if I look at that and say that is the big difference maker, right? It's the thing where it's like a skill level that is like where you are just doing something different from what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
The question for me then becomes like, okay, like where can I do that? And how do I get there? Right? It's like, if I want to, like online courses, I'm like, I want to fundamentally destabilize the world of online courses. So like, I want to ruin it for everyone else. So I'm like, what does that look like as a process then? Like for me, it's been like, okay, I'm going to read certain things. I'm going to be way more aggressive about my reading, way more aggressive about what I do in my reading. So now I'm like, I take all my notes, I break them into like summarized chunks that are like individual pieces of information. Then I network those. I use Rome, like Rome Research as the project where I'm like, put it all in, connect it all. And then I'm writing every week, and I'm going to be always thinking about like, what's the next and what's the next and what do I need to know? I'm like, I need to know statistics, and I need to know this, and I need to know that, and I need to know education. I need to understand theater. And I'm like, okay, I'm like, put it all together. It's my curriculum vitae. And I'm gonna learn that, and I'm gonna master it, right? And if I come out with these skill sets, I will be able to do a thing that is profoundly different from what everybody else does, right? So I'm like, I used to just constantly think about it. In fact, I thought about this for this. I've had to deliberately not run Facebook ads to my course. I'm like, I'm not doing it. What I want to do is make a course that's so flipping good that people refer it so wildly that I never have to run traffic to it ever again. Right.
Right.
And it's like, so I don't know, it's just a different way of thinking about it, but it's,
you can do that.
Combining those two things together is really
the key with that though. You just have to be okay with the speed of the acceptance of your idea. Right. Mm-hmm. The only thing is, if you do it that way, it's a great way. It's just slower. Right. That's the only thing. And some people can't deal with that, you know? But it is it's a fantastic way. And if you can stand the wait, then the upside is better, because the people that come in are better, you know? Yeah. You talk about people going through the course and doing the things, like the quality is better. Everything is better about it. And part of that is because of that loop that you create, you know?
Yeah. But, I think a lot about like Nassim Taleb, right? Who wrote Anti-Fragile and
Black
Swan. Like, I don't know. Do you follow him on Twitter or anything?
I don't. No, I don't. I'm looking at stuff.
He's a fantastic Twitter follow.
Okay.
He is such a sassy piece of, SOB. He is just constantly yelling at everybody, and he's great. And he's funny, right? But the thing I think about his books, right? His books were very influential on me. And specifically because it's like, the stuff he says is great. It's an interesting guy. But it's more about how he writes, right? Like I could open a book and I could tell you almost immediately whether he wrote it or not, right?
Right.
He is weird. He's weird. The subjects are weird. They don't feel like they go together until you see how they go together. He's constantly calling people out and calling people names, which is not a thing that happens in business books, right? He's like, hey, I know it's a book about economics, but like Alan Greenspan is a total dickwad. And like here, it's like, whoa, okay. So, and he's funny, and he's just talking about how he eats a lot, and he's just, and then he's talking about deadlifting, and like it's really weird mishmash, but it's completely uniquely him. Right. And what he's done. And he talks about this in his I think his last book is Skin in the Game, right? He talks about this where he's like, I've just built an audience which will buy anything I do. Yeah. So he literally on Twitter, he was like, hey, by the way, they're coming out with like a gold-lined hardcover box set of all my books, right? So it's basically like the Marvel Cinematic Universe like DVD box set where it comes with all this extra stuff. It's like $300, and it like sold out. It just sold. It was like immediately sold out, right? And I'm like, that's what I want, right? I'm like, I just want to do the thing that's like so different and good that people are like, I'm in. I'm just in for whatever you do, and he calls it like FU money, right? Where it's just like I just have enough money to be like, I never have to do anything I don't want to do ever.
It's like Elon Musk making a flamethrower and selling 30,000 of them.
I know.
Just for nothing.
I have complicated feelings about Elon Musk, but I will say because he wanted to make those giant drills to like drill holes, and he called it the Boring Company. Right. Classic pun business name. Right. I gotta hand it to him. Not many people are willing to put millions of dollars into a pun name. Yeah. So, but to close the loop on your idea though, and bring Tony Robbins around again, I think part of the way that you get there, because I feel very much the same way that you do, and I actually probably over the course of the last 18 months or so, actually feel like I'm moving in that direction. Yeah. I think part of it though is just an evolution of you as a person, figuring out like who you are and what you actually want to talk about and do to that depth. Because for example, you talk about podcasts.
one of the reasons why I started doing this, what we're doing right now, is because I started listening to Joe Rogan. Okay. Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, Joe Rogan, he's so lucky. He's so, that dude is like the best interviewer that I've ever heard ever. He will just sit down and talk to somebody for 3 hours.
I know. Those
like,
shows are long.
And he does it like 3 times a week, you know, but this is why it's so great though, because he talks about only stuff that he likes, that he's interested in. That's what makes it so great. And that's why you like it. He asks questions because he's actually interested in the thing. You know, that's why I tell you, like, we're going to call on this podcast. We're just basically going to talk about stuff that I'm interested in, or that you're, you know what I'm saying? Or that like, that's interesting. It always circles around to business and like mindset, because that's like what we're into. Like he talks about hunting, you know, like I like to talk about that stuff and I think about that stuff all the time. So it's interesting to me. And there's so many different sort of ways that you can pull that stuff in. He does too, though. He talks about that stuff too, but in the context of, like we talk about in the context of Facebook advertising and course creation and service businesses. He talks about in the context of hunting and jujitsu and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah.
But like, you know, I could see myself doing this forever, you know, like having these conversations, because they're really fun. Like when we're done, I feel great. I don't feel tired, you know, and I also think that it's pretty entertaining for the right kind of person. I think they would like this conversation, you know, because we're talking about things that are interesting, that are relevant, that other people are thinking about, you know, at the same time. So
you're getting people that are like you, right?
That's right.
There's that Venn diagram of what they like and what you like. There's enough of a crossover, right? And I think it's a really powerful thing. Yeah, I think for so long. So my life has been split down the middle ever since I was 20, between music and everything I did professionally, right? Yeah. So it's like I was always in bands. I was like touring around. When I was, I don't even know now. It was like 2008. My band with my friend Tim, we self-released a record. So we literally like burned it on CDRs. And like, this is not, you know, we went to Staples and wrapped it in a thing. Yep. This is not a fancy thing. But we had a MySpace, and I emailed people and I was like, do you want the thing? And I'll mail it to you, right? Because we couldn't figure out how to like transfer files and all this stuff. So it's like, we did that. And that album that we CDR'd in 2008, it is still in print on vinyl. It still gets pressed on vinyl. It sells out every time it comes out. It's got like multi-million listeners on Spotify or whatever, right? That's like awesome. That's how the vast majority of people know who I am. Yeah. So that audience is not the real estate marketing audience, right? They are very separate. So for forever, I was like, I have to keep these two things separate. So it was always like Facebook's for work, Twitter's for music, Instagram's for like whatever. Yeah. It's mostly pictures of my kids. Right. And never the twain shall meet. Right. Yep. And I've been like that forever. And, you know, it was like we were supposed to meet at like a mastermind event. We were supposed to have a mastermind out in California. The week before that, I was supposed to play a metal festival in the Netherlands. Right. So I'm like, it's weird. It's a weird thing. And I'm like, but ever since like one time in school, when I was working in public school, my boss found my band and she's like, oh, I want to listen to your band. And I was like, nah, you don't really need to. Said, no, I want to hear it. And then she came back the next day and she was like, your band's some kind of like devil music or, you know, like that. Like she just didn't get it. And I was like, it's fine, you know? So I was always like, you gotta keep those things separate. And lately I've just been feeling kind of like, I think like, you know, I just turned 40. I turned 40 this year. So I'm like, this is the time to bring these things together somehow. Right. And I don't know what it really looks like, but I'm kind of tired of pretending like one thing doesn't exist and the other thing doesn't exist. Right. And I was always joking, like when COVID first started happening and Bernie was still in the kind of presidential race, half my timeline is Bernie supporters like organizing rent strikes. And then the other half of my timeline is landlords freaking out. Right. Talking about, can I evict my tenants? Like, you know, and so I was like, somehow there's some overlap there. For me, it's like, the way I've been trying to think about it is like the tools of business are incredibly effective, right? But they are ultimately agnostic in terms of like whether what you do makes the world a better place or not, right? I can create, this kind of goes back to our kind of early online marketing days, an incredibly effective revenue producing thing that makes every single person that touches it worse. I can do that.
Right.
And that happens every single day. And at the same time, I know a bunch of creative people that are awesome and like they want to write and they want to make music and they want to make movies and want to do things and want to build businesses, and they can't because they're too sad and they don't know how to do anything. Right. And I'm like, I want to give these people the tools of business, and I want to give business like a creative sensibility where it's like you have to, like, for me, like the aesthetics of the business, and I don't mean like how your logo looks. I mean literally like how does your business feel to the people that engage with it? There's some kind of crossover there, and I don't really know what it is, but I don't know. It's gotten me really jazzed up to think about it and explore it and work on it. So yeah, I'm enjoying it, man. And my business is still kicking butt. It's not like I stopped working on it. Still work on it every day. I love my team. We're getting through this kind of coronavirus thing as best we can, and it's going well. So yeah, I've got nothing to complain about. I'm a very lucky dude in many ways.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well said. I think, so we're over time. I don't know what your schedule's like, but I want to say two things real quick. And I want to get a hot take on something. Yeah. So first of all, and these all sort of blend together. You do a email newsletter like on Wednesdays. It's called like question of the week or something. What's it called?
Better questions as well.
Yeah, better questions. Tell people how to go. Where can somebody go to subscribe to that? Because it's really interesting. You don't sell anything. It's just really thought provoking. It's good. So I want to send people there. What's that?
Cool. Yeah. So betterquestionsemail.com.
All right. Betterquestionsemail.com. Perfect.
Yep.
And I'm going to
sort of email a week, one question. It's just meant to be, thought provoking. This week, I mean, every week I've been like, don't know about this one. I'm going to send this out, see what happens. So this one,
I think they're great. I read them. So I think they're wonderful.
Yeah, hopefully, I would love people to check that out. That's kind of where I'm just trying to practice. I'm practicing my writing.
Yep, I love it. And then, so actually, what I'm going to talk about didn't come from that email, but it came from another post that you put out on Facebook earlier, and something that I did. I'm just curious. I want to mark this space and time so we can see if you're correct or not.
All right.
There's this. I can't remember what you called it, but it's basically the idea of you sort of reach a decision or a conclusion or the way that you think something is going to go, and then you actually sort of you write it down, and you write down why and what you think the outcome is going to be, so that you can go back later and sort of test your decision making process or sort of your thought process. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, decision journal.
Decision journal.
Decision journal. Yep.
Decision journal. So when I saw that post, I did a decision journal, and that was probably like a month ago, right? I think.
Yeah, it was a while ago now.
Yeah. I did a decision journal about the coronavirus.
Yes.
And about where I thought it was going to go and why. I may have even talked about it in your Facebook post. I thought it was the description that you laid out was like way more eloquent and actually way better than what I just did. But I'm just fascinated by everyone's sort of view about this virus and where it is and where it's going.
Interesting. It is so interesting how everyone is looking at the same thing, and they are just completely different conclusions.
Right. Like and it's also this is I don't know where this really started to, like, I think politics in general I think this is going to sound bad. But I think people's sort of lack of sophistication when it comes to marketing and being able to see that they are being marketed to, and coupled with really great, amazing marketers has created, and then inject politics, has created the country the way it is now, where people are so tied to one point of view and feel emotionally sort of held to it.
Yeah.
And it backs them into corners where you can't actually just have a conversation about something and hear someone's opposing viewpoint and just be okay with it. Like people not agreeing with you, That's sort of a total tangent, because I see it all the time, and I'm just like, why are you getting angry because somebody thinks whatever, like fill in the blank. You know what I'm saying? Like who are you? I just don't like it because I'm like, who are you to like decide that your view is right over someone else's, you know? But that's a total tangent.
Yeah.
What is tell me your decision journal audio version of coronavirus? Like, what are you thinking about this whole thing? Just whatever you want to say. You don't have to get too. I'm just curious though about what do you think about all of this? You know?
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, I was saying like this has been one of the most incredible things to happen in my lifetime. And I think it's like, I think because, you know, probably closest parallel is 9/11 in the sense of like world changing events, right? And I'm not saying like they're equivalent in any way. I'm just saying this level of holy moly, right? And I don't know if you remember, but like I remember very specifically the feeling of 9/11, like after 9/11, like 2 days after, the sense of being like, what's going to happen next? Like what's coming next? Like, is this just like one of 10, right? It's like, what's happening, right? So,
I remember we're the same age. There were like lines at gas stations and stuff. Like it was kind of weird. Like nobody really knew what was going on. So people were like kind of freaked out, you know?
Yeah. It was a very, so yeah. So, but now I'm much older. Right. And so what I see primarily is I see so you kind of want to think about everything that happens, right? There's the thing that happens, and then there's the narrative about the thing that happens.
100%.
And then there's like the meta narrative. And the meta narrative is like people who are trying to change the narrative in like one direction or another, right? And so this is the first time in my adult life where I'm like, the fault lines of that process, meaning like what is happening in that process, they're just never been clearer to me, which is not to say I understand what's going on. I just see that stuff is going on, right? And I don't mean like, and part of the problem is like with our culture today is that we have such deeply ingrained skepticism about media narratives and the narratives of people in power that we equalize the narratives of people who are like just have, you know, it's like, I have a YouTube channel and that guy says this. Right. So I'm going to put that up here with like the New York Times or whatever. Right. And so I'm very careful when I say stuff like that, because what I don't mean is that I think there are a bunch of people like pulling the strings and manipulating the narrative of American culture. I think that it's like, we're in this weird system where we're bouncing off each other. And it's like, okay, cool. Like you bounced off him and he bounced off you. And I see where you got your information. And I'm just able to understand it a little bit more. Not very much, but a little bit more. So a good example is the decision journal. I started writing down, I'm like, okay, based on what I'm reading, here's what I think coronavirus is going to look like in a month. And I wrote it down. And then I went back and checked it. Because one of the things that drives me freaking up a wall is I can get on TV and say, this is no worse than the flu. Only, you know, whatever, less than 5,000 people are going to die. We'll be lucky if we get 100 cases. And by the time that check comes due, I'm on to the next thing. And I'm never held accountable, right? It's the same thing with like people who predict stocks and they're wrong like 80% of the time. And like no one calls them on, right? So I'm like, I'm going to call myself out. I'm like, if I make a prediction and I believe something, like, and so I made like pretty much all my predictions have been wrong. Literally every single one. I don't think I've been right a single time about what coronavirus is going to do.
That's awesome.
Usually I think it's going to be worse than it is.
Yeah.
My current point of view for whatever it's worse is that it's not going to be as bad as I thought it was going to be. I don't know how to tell whether that's because we acted or whatever.
Right.
But I think it's going to go on way longer than people think it is. I just think I'm like, this year is a dead year and next year's probably at least half a dead year. And I'm like, I don't think most people are strapping in for as long as the long haul is. Yeah. And I'll give you another example. When this all started happening, it first started coming like into my kind of attention, right? So it's like, actually I had a client point this out, that on the day that the newspaper when Kobe Bryant died, which by the way, seems like it was a million years ago. it was in January.
Right. It wasn't that long
So
ago. Yeah.
when Kobe Bryant died, the newspaper was like front page story, Kobe Bryant. And then the column next to it was about coronavirus. Right. And I'm like, to me, I don't even think that like coronavirus was registering for me.
Right.
Right. So, you know, as that thing has started happening, right, and started coming, I really thought that, I thought that like the whole prepping thing was goofy. I thought that the run on supermarkets was hysteria driven, right? And I'm not saying that like I thought that like all these people are crazy or whatever, but I'm just like, there's no reason to stock up on toilet paper, right?
Right.
But what ended up happening is our supply chain really was incredibly vulnerable. There really was like a deep meat shortage. Yeah. And there really is like all these things. And like, I'll tell you what I'm doing now. I'm stocking up now. I'm like, I told my wife, I was like, we need to get like 3 months worth of rice.
Right.
And we need to get a bunch of meat in the freezer. And we need to get a bunch of toilet paper. We just need to get the essentials, because what's happening now? Well, as we record this, people are starting to open back up. Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't listen the first time when someone said, hey, a really communicable disease can disrupt supply lines. I didn't listen. So I'm like, it's my job to listen now. And it's like, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but I'm saying it's like too often what would happen is the first time I would poo-poo the preppers, and then the second time I come around, I just do it again.
Right.
Right. I think that this is a Taleb thing, and Nassim Taleb thing, where he just says, look, it's not that any one event is probable, right? So it's not that coronavirus was destined to happen. It's not that a meteor striking the world is destined to happen. But the problem is, because we all live in this incredibly interconnected economy where we're all so tightly knit and we're all interdependent, something's going to happen. And those things are going to happen more and more frequently, right?
Right.
So it's like, it might not be coronavirus next time, but it'll be something. It'll be something, right? So it's, whether you think about it, it's like, you know, the flash crash in the stock market that was like computer programs selling off stock, or you think about like, you know, 2008, or you think about 9/11, or you think about coronavirus. It's like, it's always something. It's always going to be something. And I think we underestimate, I think we think because our economy is complex, it's resilient, but it's the opposite. Like, complex things don't do super well. And like just in time supply chains are great when everything lines up, and they're bad when they don't.
Right.
So I'm just, you know, I don't necessarily think that I understand it. In fact, probably the biggest lesson I've learned is I don't understand it, right? The thing I look out for is I look for the people who are certain they haven't figured out. And I'm like, you're almost 100% wrong.
Right.
I can almost 100% guarantee that if you think you're right, you're wrong. And I don't even know what's right. I just know that if you think you're right, you're probably wrong. And so I look for people that are like, for example, like opening up the economy. It's like, whether you think that's right or wrong, I'm just like, if you swing too hard in any one direction, I'm gonna bet that that's a bad idea, right? So I don't know. That's kind of where I've ended up. So I'm sucking up on rice. I don't know whether that's good or bad, but
well, it can't hurt. You know, it's good to do anyway, because there could be a natural disaster. There could be any different things that happen that cut you off and you need food. I mean, that's never a bad thing. You know, what I've started doing is every time I go to the grocery store, I just grab like an extra thing. You know. Yeah. And we just pack it away. It's stuff like rice. Like, I don't eat rice, but you know, I just grab a box of rice, and you know, you do that enough days in a row, and you got a whole bunch of stuff, you know? Yeah. And you don't feel like a prepper either. So you're prepping without feeling like a prepper, which is nice.
Yeah. It's really interesting, man. Like it's really fundamentally changed the way I see the world. And I think we had such good times for so long. Is really easy to believe. Even if intellectually you asked me, I would have been like, oh yeah, I get it. Good times don't last forever. Emotionally, you don't really buy that.
Yeah.
And so,
I still don't, me personally, I still don't buy that. I think things I think people will forget about this eventually. We'll move past it and move on to other things. What I'm really disappointed in with this whole thing, and you might get this because of the company that you run, but like the willingness for leaders to act on a complete lack of data and not do anything to sort of shore that problem up over the course of these like 3 months or 4 months or whatever, that for me has been the most sort of shocking thing that I've experienced through this, because I just want people to make when you have a novel event, you're going to have to make decisions without being sure of the outcome. But I would much rather have, your rifle be like sighted, than to just be shooting around in the dark, which is what I kind of feel like is happening a lot of the time. Like there's still like there's no, systematized way to test everybody. We don't even track the people that have the coronavirus in the same way. Like people that die of a heart attack, but they have the virus. They get counted some places. They don't get counted other places. It's like, it makes it so hard to figure out what the hell you're supposed to do, because it's more than it's just a guess,
It's, I think there's sort of like two primary things at work, which are like, really, these are things that like, it's a nerdy thing to care about, but I really care deeply about, right? Which is, one is, there's a very big difference between risk and uncertainty, right?
Yep.
Risk is, I've got a 20% chance of, getting punched in the groin, and an 80% chance of winning $100. And you take the bet. How do you make the decision based on risk?
Right.
Uncertainty is, you don't know. I say, like, there's some percent chance you're going to get punched in the groin and some percent chance you get $100. Those are very different. And the vast majority of people don't realize there's a difference, don't know how to tell the difference, and don't really think about how they would make decisions in each situation. And I don't really know either. I'm only at the point of knowing, oh, those are different things, and I have to really think about it, right?
Yeah.
And there are like decision-making models, like decision-making under uncertainty, that's game theory. So it's like, there are people that like literally study it, and like you can learn about it, but it's like, it's kind of hard, right? But it's a thing I really think we need to do. I mean, the flip side of that, right? The other problem is, people love to rag on identity politics, right? It's like, oh, it's identity politics. And it's like, well, usually what they mean is, well, I'm black and I believe this because I'm black, or I'm gay and I believe this because I'm gay, or whatever. But like, the truth is that like all politics is identity politics, right? We are fundamentally tribal. In the United States, we are basically divided into like two giant tribes, and there's a bunch of warring tribes within those. And we all really identify with certain positions and pictures of ourselves, and things that threaten those are very disturbing. And that's a deep, deep evolutionary thing. Yeah. So I look at things like, what that can lead us to is this place where data is viewed as potentially damaging. So it's like, well, I don't want to know it. If I don't know it, it doesn't hurt me, right? And like the classic example for me, it's like, it's literally written into law, right? That certain studies about firearm-caused fatalities can't be undertaken by the government. Like the federal government legally cannot, for example, say like exactly how many guns are sold and how many fatalities those guns produce. There's literally a law that like limits what kind of research can be done.
Right.
And so what that ends up happening is like, if you want to have a conversation that says, for example, if you want to argue like gun legalization is overall good, it's totally possible. You want to argue like we should ban all guns, maybe that's good. I don't know. Right. I don't have any numbers. How can you possibly make that decision? It drives me up a wall, because it's just this willingness to be like, I'm just going to cover my eyes and pretend it's not happening, right? And it's like, you can't have a conversation about what the conversation is about. The conversation is really about, I am wedded to a position and I don't want to let it go.
Right.
Because who's going to say that? We all think we're rational. Nobody is. That's the other thing is like, I just want everybody to internalize the fact that like, you're not rational, I'm not rational. We have an ethical responsibility to constantly assess how we make decisions.
Right.
And it's boring. It's not fun.
Yeah. You also throw in science and politics, two areas where you would think that people would have the responsibility to be able to sort of walk back what the position that they've taken and say, now that I've learned something new, I'm going to change the way that I'm going. Right. And it gets a little bit difficult. I mean, I understand. For example, I understand that like this I'm not trying to poo-poo the seriousness of coronavirus, but it's definitely not as serious as it was once thought. But to continue to come out and say like some of these things that are, again, just not founded on any actual science, but just a fear of sort of an overall worst case scenario with the virus, I think is sort of, I don't like it. I think it's kind of irresponsible to not hedge what you're saying. Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, I think because here's the thing, right? You can be 100% accurate, 100% accurate by saying something that's so vague as to be useless, right?
Right.
It will either be rainy or not tomorrow.
Right.
I'm right, right?
That's right.
So it's like, and so we prize people who are like willing to go out there and put out an opinion, right? But the problem is there's no punishment when your opinion is dead wrong, right? There's no, and then the flip side of what you're talking about, right, is like, well, I should be able to be wrong and then walk it back when new decision making comes to light, right? But to do that, you have to have an honest conversation about how you made your decision.
Right. Well, that's why the decision journal is so important, because if you just if you go back and look at the way that things have happened, you can see how sort of off base a lot of these things have been, right? It's like, the thing that I think about all the time is, except for New York, probably, there are a couple of other spots where the medical system saw a lot of literal overextension.
Mm-hmm.
They went and built all these medical hospitals. They put all these temporary things up. There was supposed to be this huge peak, but that just didn't happen, right? Mm-hmm. Whether or not it was the cause of everybody sort of holding up or not, I think if you go back and you look at what they were actually saying was, the peak is coming, we should go inside now and wait for the peak to get over. When in fact, the peak sort of actually never came, or it was just lower than expected. Mm. Like, it's all these different things that I wish they would just look at and try to make an informed decision based on what's again, I'm just really, I don't know what the right thing to do is. I don't have a really harsh stance, like one way or the other necessarily. But what really sort of makes me frustrated is, this thing has been going on now for like at least 3 months. They still can't tell you like what the true death rate is, right, on this thing. They can't even tell you what percentage of people are asymptomatic. They can't tell you anything, Well,
what's really fascinating is if you ask people, so most people I think will agree, okay, like we don't have like really great immediate numbers. Are the numbers under or over reporting COVID deaths? That's the interesting question. Because then it's like, then you have to make a decision about what's most likely, right? And some people will say it's underreported, and some people say it's overreported.
It's impossible to know, though, because
it might be impossible to know, but you can make an argument one way or the other. But it's like,
you can't either way. But the fact that in reality, what you should be able to do is say it's sort of a moot point, because this is the way that we're determining a COVID death. Like, over or under becomes irrelevant if you just define the way that you're characterizing it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, like, you could say, is somebody overweight or underweight, and you could argue it 100 different ways. But if you say we're going to look at like BMI to make that determination, well, now you've got at least now you can just say, like, at least according to this way that we decided to define it, it's over or under,
Yeah, but then you have things like, well, okay, so the people that like never got tested, so they never got tested, right? So there's always uncertainty like built into the system, one way or the other, right?
There is in some way, but now you don't even know. Like, it's just like, even as simple as, does somebody actually have to like, for example, I'll give you a perfect example. Mm-hmm. Flu deaths are counted in a very specific way. Mm-hmm. We may lose some because they don't get tested for the flu. They may die in some other way. But we know on average how many flu deaths there are every year, because we've just defined what that looks like. If somebody dies of a heart attack and they have the flu, they count as a heart attack death, not as a flu death. Somebody dies in a car accident and they have the flu, they don't get counted as a flu death. But I'm not sure whether any of those are counted or not. Does that make sense? Like, it's not even that they are or aren't. I just don't think there's actually a defined standard out there for how to count them. And I actually don't care either way, but it's really hard to
Yeah, it's very hard
No.
to tell. So like flu death's a really good example, right? It's like, so one of the fascinating things about this whole debate has been, we're kind of past it now because we're like, I think everybody thinks that like the death toll is like much higher than the seasonal flu now, but it's like for like the first 2 months it was, this is just a flu,
Right.
right? But versus it's not the flu, you idiot. And you're like, yeah, it is. And like, ugh. And the Spanish flu, and like everyone's like digging up all these historical flus, right? It's like all of a sudden people know about like the flu of 1918. I'm like,
Right.
you know about that? I don't know anything about that. Like, does everyone read about that in school and I missed it or whatever? But anyway, so it's like, so I'm like, I'm like, okay, like how many people die of the flu? Like I'm like, everyone's throwing this out, and it turns out like there is no solid number of people who die of the flu. You know how we figure out how many people die of the flu? We use statistical modeling, the exact same statistical modeling they use for COVID. The only reason we don't talk about it is because it's not politicized. If people actually gave a shit about the, sorry, I don't know if you're going to swear on this podcast.
We've already been cussing. We've already been cussing.
All right, great. So it's like if people really cared about it, there would be the exact same debate about the flu. That like, well, we can't trust the model.
But the reason that we're not though is because the economy is not getting shut down because.
Well, exactly, right. So we're not fighting over it.
Well, it's not that we're not fighting over it. We're not making huge, monumental, world-changing decisions based off of those flu numbers, right? That's why.
Well,
because that's the main reason why. If we were, we would care. But and that's the only thing. Like if you're going to make these huge decisions, like I just feel like the responsible thing to do is to, and I don't know what this way is, in counting the actual what we've been talking about doesn't even really probably factor into that much. But to come up with some kind of a standard, some sort of a, like, this is how we're going to figure out what we should do.
Yeah.
And then just follow that thing. Like it doesn't, I'm not an expert on this.
Yeah.
But there are people out there that should be able to come up with some sort of an idea of how to manage this, you know, and it is new. That means it may be an evolving theory, but I feel like right now everybody's just guessing, and or the people in leadership are just going off of their gut instinct. You know, like every single governor in the United States has a different idea of what they want to do. Mm-hmm. It can't all be based on science. It can't all be based on, they're basically just guessing, you know, like everybody's doing something kind of different. No one's doing the same thing.
I think the real pill to swallow, right, which would be my rejoinder, as much as we're not really on opposite sides, but like my rejoinder to that would be, I think you're positing that there's a version of this that has less uncertainty, and I don't think there is. I think even in situations where we think we know, like so for the flu, like flu death numbers, we actually don't know that, right? So we're never in a situation, you only get certainty in retrospect, right? So I'll be able to tell you how many people died in January, like 5 years from now, right? It's like, and even then,
no, you're 100% right. You're 100% right. But right now we're sort of like rowing in the ocean, but we don't have anywhere that we're going, and no one's rowing in the same direction. So we can't get the feedback that we need to make sure that we're going in the right direction, right? Like when you fire a rocket, it never stays exactly on course, but it sort of has an idea of where it's trying to go. And then it can iterate based on the feedback that it's getting from the world. I feel like right now that we're not doing that at all. Like no one knows. There's no way to tell if we're going in the right direction. Does that make sense? I mean, there's no, and it's not an easy problem to solve. There's
no control group, right? There's no control group.
That's right.
So it's like, I would have much rather, you know, we go all in on, you know, pass a law that, I mean, I don't want to pass a law that everyone can't leave their house, but I'm being sort of goofy, right? Like pass a law that no one can leave their house. Everyone gets a universal basic income. I would have much rather had that, or fed for yourselves. Everyone go out with like, just, you know, we're going to mail a box to Purell at every house in America and like just have at it. You know what I mean? Right. Because instead what we're kind of going to get, which is the American way, if there ever was one, is the worst of all possible worlds, which is a compromise, which is we damage the economy and now we're going to open up and we're going to get more. We're still going to have a bunch of people die. So it's
but the thing is, maybe that's the problem. That's the problem. No, it's a maybe, because we don't know how many people get infected. We don't know how they get infected. Like we don't know with enough definitiveness to make these kind of choices. And that would have been fine 3 months ago. But like, just think about the questions that you want to answer and try to find a way to answer them. You know, if you're in charge, just whatever that means. You know what I'm saying? Like,
this gets us back to the data is damaging, right? Yeah. Some people just don't want to know.
No, they don't.
And I think that's true on both sides, right?
No, of course, it's true. 100%. Like that, no one. For me, this isn't a political thing. I think everyone's terrible. I think everyone is sort of not leading from the front, like not really trying to. In this, you know, this also comes. This is a much bigger discussion now. Politics in general, I think, lacks a definitive leadership in across all parties and across all things, because the people that are sort of true leaders, which means for me willing to do the hard things and say the hard things that need to be done, take a long-term view, those people are in business for the most part, right? They've given up on utilizing the government to sort of do the things that they are interested in, and they just go do them on their own, you know? Not to say that they would be better in politics, but for somebody to come out and say, look, this is not in my best interest short-term, but it's the thing that we need to do, I believe, to have a long-term success. You never hear that. Zero. Yeah. In politics. And it's part of it is the system. And I understand why it happens, but that doesn't make it right. And that's not what we need. You know what I'm saying? That's not a good leadership to do that, you know? So.
Well, and it's like, I literally got into like a Twitter beef, as putting it strongly. I sent someone actually one of my favorite websites. So there's a website, Farnham Street. It's a fantastic website. Does a lot of work on like mental models, a lot of work on investing, really smart guy that has a great podcast. And he tweeted an article today, and it was like, just stop reading the news. That was the thing. It's like, stop reading the news, stresses you out.
Yeah.
And I just hate that attitude. I really do. Because I'm like, what ends up happening is that like the smartest people, like the most capable people, who are people in business, I really believe this, right? The most capable people, they end up opting out of the life of the republic. And I'm like, we all benefit from living in a democracy. Like, sure. And I'm like, the ethical responsibility of taking place in the democracy is you got to know what's going on. So I'm like, look, I'm like, we live in a country, regardless of how you feel about this, right? What I'm going to say, right? Like, we live in a country where objectively we put children in cages. We put children crossing the border in cages and separated them from their families. And I'm like, you can think that's a good call or bad call, but I'm like, it is your responsibility to know that that happened, to know about it, and to have an opinion about it. Because when you vote, you should remember that it happened, right? So I'm like, it's like, you know, they're saying it's like, well, the news is ephemeral and it's not what lasts. And I'm like, yeah, that's what stuff is. Life is ephemeral and nothing lasts, right? It's right. Like it all is blowing by us. So it's like, whatever the pace is, like I get the paper once a week. I read it once a week. And I'm like, that's my thing. And I'm like, cool. That's my news intake. It's enough for me to feel connected to the life of the republic, right? I'm like, this is my duty. It's a political duty. I think it's like, we're so like self-oriented as a culture. So it's like self-care, and I don't want to get stressed out, and the news makes me feel bad. And I'm like, right. Some shit should make you feel bad.
That's right.
It's okay. Right. It's like,
right.
I'm like, rage is a cleansing emotion, you know, just, but you have to tamp it with some rationality and some understanding of like media literacy, and some understanding of like everybody you talk to has a bias. Everybody you talk to has a certain amount of uncertainty baked into everything that they say. So you have to understand like statistics. Like I'm reading right now, like How to Lie with Statistics. It's one of my favorite books of all time already. And it's like, here's how you make a chart that looks super awesome, and it really just kind of sucks. And it's like, I'm like, amazing, right? It's like, that's the stuff that like, it's this like political media literacy that's so critical, because otherwise what ends up happening is the smartest people tune out and they're worried about what's going on in their lives. And and I'm like, we need that turned out to society.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man, I feel a real responsibility to the people around me. And like, I'm not a particularly charitable person at all. Like I don't really give to charity or whatever, but I'm like, the people around me, like the my town, like the people that matter to me, like I'm like, there are structures above us, like power structures, societal structures that control what happens to those people and affects what happens to those people, and people I'm never going to meet. And I'm like, it's kind of on me to make a decision one way or the other about how I think that power should be used. And I don't know, man, it's a bum out to me when people say like, don't read the news or like, don't tune into it. It's just going to stress you out. I'm like, yeah, you can know that and still get value out of it and use that. Because otherwise someone else just makes a decision. Someone always makes a decision. It's either going to be you or someone else. So I'd rather have Chris Small weighing in on the coronavirus on Fox News than whoever is there. Right. Cause like, I don't know. I'm rambling, but.
Oh, I love it. Hey, and by the way, that's a great place to stop. Me on Fox News, rambling about the coronavirus. Because
with that, I didn't mean to spoil your surprise announcement, Chris.
I wish. I'm going to send this clip to them and be like, look, someone thinks I should be on your show.
People are saying.
I'm just saying. This guy, Dan, he is a world famous podcast guest. He says it. Let's do it.
Right? World famous as a guest. Built nothing himself.
That's right.
Cool, man. So that was fun. That was a blast.
Yeah, it was awesome. I loved it. I got to go. I'm late to a phone call. I'm about to pee my pants, to be honest with you. So I got a whole bunch of different things going on. But I really appreciate you coming on. Hopefully I'll be able to see you in person in a couple months.
Dude, that'd be amazing. I can't.
And yeah, all the things. So great talking to you. And I will talk to you soon.
Likewise, man. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.